Hey everyone, Warrax here. So I've played all 6 tanks in Prepatch, and let's go back and let's revisit my first impressions. If you're looking for only one spec of tank to really go a little bit more in depth on, I'm definitely going to encourage you to check out all of the videos that I've done for my initial reactions and dungeon runs that I've done on each spec. You'll be seeing some of the footage from the dungeon runs for each of the tanks here, but if you want the full run to kind of see how the spec plays out in full, then you can definitely do that. Also listen to me banter with my guildmates. So now that I've had a chance to really sit down and really think about my thoughts on each spec, I wanted to kind of lay out some more detailed thoughts on each spec with some review and some time to separate from each of them. We'll do these in order of the videos in the way that they were released. So we're going to start with Brewmaster Monk. So the Brewmaster Monk is extremely fun to play. It was the tank that I had the most fun with. There are some minimal gaps in those rotations, but the gaps that are there can be filled by things like Covenant abilities, new abilities like Clash, or as stats improve, the gaps just kind of close naturally. Iron Skin Brew being baked into the new passive Shuffle is a big boon to the playability of the spec. Iron Skin Brew and BFA just didn't really add any complexity or fun to the rotation of Brewmaster, and it was the thing that I found the most frustrating about the spec. Purifying and Celestial Brew maintained the complexity of the brew mechanic in sort of a newer, unique way. The spec feels smooth, where the rotation feels intuitive and the mob control and utility are just skill-based enough that good monks and great monks are separated pretty clearly. I think Brewmaster is going to stay in a solid place in all expansion. My biggest worry from a core gameplay standpoint is that the talents feel very one-note. The build is pretty much the same no matter what you're running, whether it be Mythic Plus or Dungeons. The only variation may be in Rated Battlegrounds, but who really cares about Rated Battlegrounds? They just, talents like Spitfire and Special Delivery and the Celestial Flames just feel like Rated Battleground players are really going to be able to take advantage of those. No Mythic Plus or Raid tank is going to take any of these new talents. I think Brewmaster is a fantastic tank if you're new to tanking. It's pretty easy and pretty pick up to learn. And then the returning players, I think, are going to be very happy with some of the changes going into Shadowlands overall. So I think Brewmaster is a fantastic tank and is definitely the top on my list so far. We're going to move on to Blood Death Knight. To be honest, Blood feels really bad to play at level 50. The stat squish, the loss of corruption, the loss of Ossuary as talent into a baked passive that you don't get until level 58 make the spec feel like a shell of itself. The core rotation doesn't change, so there's not much to say there. The yo-yo effect of Blood's HP bar is helped with Rune Tap being added to the cooldown rotation that Blood already has. The damage intake did feel smoother than it did in BFA, but everything else around the spec just really stands out negatively. The damage was extremely low compared to the other tanks that I tested. I think it was the lowest of all. That said, I'm very curious to try this spec out at higher stat levels, and with all the level up perks in place. Blood is already a low APM, or actions per minute spec, so filling gaps with Covenant abilities is going to be pretty simple. The spec I think has a lot of potential, but it's not going to be realized until Shadowlands endgame. Unless you're trying to gear up a Blood tank now in the pre-patch, I recommend staying away from this spec for the time being. We're going to move on to Guardian Druid, the tank spec I was most worried about of the tanks that I played in BFA. I actually found Bear to be pretty fun, pretty good to play. The damage was a lot more than I was expecting it to have, and there's some good variety potential in the talent build with offensive builds with defensive builds with Blood Frenzy and Rend and Tear, or a more offensive build with Brambles and Tooth and Claw. So you can pick and choose the talents based on what you feel most comfortable playing. I'd still like to see Wild Charge made baseline with a talent to replace it that defines the second row theme from a Mobility and Tiger Dash, Heal and Renewal, Mobility and Wild Charge, to maybe a Mobility and Tiger Dash, a Heal and Renewal, and a Utility ability. Maybe this is where Typhoon can go for Bear Druids. But it's probably too late for something like that to happen. Guardian definitely has potential to be a strong tank in both Mythic Plus and Raid. Though outside of the top guilds and dungeons, within the top guilds and top dungeon groups, you're probably not going to see it that much. But I do think you're going to see it pretty spread out and pretty well represented, unlike BFA. If you want to avenge Ursoc's death, then Bear is going to be a solid choice for you in Shadowlands in my view. Maybe not the number one at any time, but I doubt you're going to get declined for being a Guardian Druid like you did at times in BFA. Next up, Protection Paladin. The hype behind this spec is real. Prop Paladin moving to a holy power system has done wonders for this spec in my eyes. The damage is insane, like Prop Warrior Season 2 of BFA levels of insane. The mitigation uptime is much stronger, and the utility is still really solid. The added bonus of Devo Aura as a flat 3% damage reduction for Prop Paladin. It's pretty big for a tank to bring his own damage reduction, as basically like a passive. Prop Paladin surprised me with how good it felt to play. I played the 2-charge Crusaders with the 2-charge Judgment build with Crusader's Judgment instead of the Captain America shield bouncing a couple times more, because that build fills gaps a little bit better than the Captain America shield build does. That is the concern I have about the spec, is that without that second charge of Judgment or Blessed Hammer becoming viable again, or rather not viable but optimal, the spec is going to have some gaps in the rotation that may end up making it very slow like Blood Decay, and you're going to rely a lot on your wings to help you generate holy power if you pick a specific talent in the 50 row. That said, Prop Paladin I think is going to be really, really strong, and I think that if you want to play Prop Paladin, you're going to make a very, very good choice. It wouldn't shock me at all if you see Prop Paladins as the #1 tank in both Mythic Plus and Raid in Castle Nathrio. Next up, Vengeance Demon Hunter. I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy this as much as I thought I would, or as much as I hoped that I would. The excitement around some of the changes had me looking forward to trying Demon Hunter for the first time since I abandoned the class back in 8.1. That said, I still see why people enjoy this. The mobility is still super fun to use, and its animations are still very top notch. It felt fairly tanky, though I was only doing a heroic dungeon, so I'm not sure how good that is to judge. And its damage felt pretty good, nearly as high as Prop Paladin. That said, there's still some major issues that I felt make the spec feel like just sour to me. Soul fragments are still a massive problem. While it's interesting in theory to have something to interact with in the gameplay field, I think it's pretty bad in practice because any mobility within a light year of your soul fragments absorbs the fragments, making your healing a little less out of your control. I think making soul frags a combo point like system would help the spec immensely. Just pull it out of the gameplay view. It's visually interesting, but practically just not well implemented. The other thing is that the talent tree still has a lot of issues. Spirit Bomb and Fracture still feel really mandatory for the spec to feel good, which means sacrificing major defensive benefits, like Immolation's Auras, extra armor, or Feed the Demon, giving you better demon spikes uptime. At higher content, I can see this being a little bit of an issue, especially when Vision Perfection Essence is gone, so that you don't get those random Metamorphosis uptime procs. Brewmaster has no build diversity, but the build works for everything. Vengeance feels like it needs the offense to do the damage it needs in order to maintain and hold threat, but the defensive abilities sacrifice so much offense that misdirected tricks of the trade become rotational abilities for your hunters and rogues. It's in a weird place. I'm really curious to see what continued iteration they have. I know that Sinful Brand, the Covenant ability, has been really, really powerful for the spec throughout the beta process, though it just took a little bit of a nerf. I'm curious to see if there's going to be any sort of Soulvine legendary Covenant ability that maybe can fill some of these gaps that the talent tree so desperately is like just outstandingly glaring. And we're going to move on to the final tank, the Prot Warrior. I'm going to be honest, also did not enjoy this tank at all. It was the only tank where I struggled to find even just the small interactions that I find fun. Avatar is pretty much the only thing that came to mind for me, is it is a top-notch cooldown. It feels good to push and has a big alteration in gameplay. The damage felt okay, though I didn't have meters up for that dungeon that I did because I forgot to fix the UI on that character. And the tankiness felt pretty good too, though again, I was only running a heroic, so who knows exactly how accurate that is. My biggest issue is that Devastator right now is the best talent in the 15 row, which basically takes away your filler ability, Devastate, and bakes all the ability of it into your auto attacks. And I think that this talent is just a bad talent. It takes away so much gameplay that it was really noticeable. I had multiple seconds of time where I just sat there hoping for a Thunderclap or Shield Slam reset, and it felt as bad as Blood Slow gameplay did. I don't know if this is going to improve with stats, but first impressions matter, and this tank remains at the bottom of the barrel for me. That said, it's going to be serviceable in Shadowlands. If you're a Prot Warrior main, I think you're and you enjoy the gameplay, you're going to find things that you can really make work well here. That said, I don't know if it's going to ever reach its peak moments that it did in Battle for Azeroth as a Mythic Plus tank, and I think it ends up in the same place in Raid where it's kind of middling. You can use it if you need one, or if that's the only tank you have, you can definitely use it and you can clear all the content with it. But the ability as it is a sort of top tier tank, it's definitely going to make your raid comp work a little bit harder around you, because you are not going to have the things that you need that, say, a prop paladin, vengeance demon hunter, or brewmaster monk are going to have. So that's my thoughts on the tanks. If you want a power ranking of what I found least fun to most fun, it kind of looks like this. At number 6, prop warrior. At number 5, vengeance demon hunter. Number 4, blood death knight. 3, prop paladin, 2, guardian druid, and brewmaster monk at the top. There are tanks that I think are going to get better with higher stats. DK and warrior definitely feel like that, and paladin to allow for the 2 charge of judgment maybe be talented away from. And I'm willing to definitely give DK a shot again. The other 2, we'll see. That said, if I'm being honest with myself, I think I'm only going to be preparing 2 tanks for Shadowlands, monk and druid. DK has DPS specs that I find way more fun, and my 4th character was always going to be a pure DPS character, so I can't get tricked into tanking. But if you want someone that wants to be able to have all the tanks set up and ready to go, I think you're not going to ever find something boring to play with. It's just going to be a matter of what do you find the most fun, or if you're someone that just wants to play with strongest at the time, figuring that one out and doing the grind. So anyways, guys and girls, that's my thoughts on tanks at level 50. If you're a tank player, what do you make of the tanks before we get into Shadowlands? Leave a comment below and don't forget to smash that subscribe button, like the video, and share with your friends, your guildmates, and on your Discord servers. DPS videos are in the works. I've already got Frost DK done, and I'm going to be doing a few specs of DPS, not all of them because I don't have that time. And maybe even a bonus monk healer video since I really enjoy Mistweaver. So look for any of those to come out over the next few weeks as we still continue to climb towards Shadowlands release. Until then, everyone, stay safe, wear your mask, and I will see you next time.